I was the one they always turned to when they needed cash, whether it was for rent, loans, or birthday gifts. And I never saw a dime returned. I let it slide, thinking that's just what family does. When my parents' 40th anniversary approached, I saw it as an opportunity to show gratitude, to do something generous for those who had, at least, tried to raise me well. So I reserved a private dining room at an upscale waterfront restaurant with crystal glasses, white-gloved waiters, and a view of the bay that looked like it belonged in a gallery. The reservation alone cost me $7,500, but I told myself it was worth it. I arrived a bit late, delayed by a work call. The room was already alive with chatter, silverware clinking against fine porcelain in the sophisticated setting. My seat right at the center was the only one still empty. Aunt Helen, who always acted like she was the family's matriarch, glanced up as I sat down. Her lips pursed briefly before she flashed a strained smile. I reached for the lobster dish in the center of the table, the most extravagant item there, when Helen leaned forward and hissed in a sharp, icy tone, "Don't touch that lobster. It's for the real family." I froze, my hand hovering mid-air, wondering if I'd misheard. Then my cousin Derek, seated to my left, let out a smug chuckle and leaned back with that arrogant smirk he always wore. "Yeah, $7,500 dinners aren't for moochers," he said, twirling his sparkling cider like he was some high roller. My face burned as I scanned the table. My sister Laura, who I'd bailed out with 4 months of mortgage payments last year, stared down at her shrimp, avoiding my gaze. Uncle Mike, who'd pleaded for a loan to prop up his failing roofing business just weeks ago, snickered into his plate. Even my parents, seated at the head of the table, stayed silent. For a moment, I felt detached, like I was watching the scene from above. These people, my own family, had just humiliated me at the very dinner I'd arranged in the room I'd paid for. They had the audacity to treat me like an outsider at my own event. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Then, slowly and deliberately, I grabbed a large piece of lobster, dipped it in warm butter, and took a bite, locking eyes with Derek the entire time. I chewed slowly, savoring the flavor as the table fell into a tense silence. I placed my napkin down, slid my chair back, and stood. Without a word, I turned and walked out. Their murmurs trailed after me through the corridor, down the grand staircase, and into the warm night air. In my car, the leather seat creaked as I gripped the steering wheel, my pulse racing. Yet, beneath the anger, I felt a strange calm. Cold, but calm. If they wanted to draw a line between us, so be it. I'd make sure it was permanent. Before pulling out of the parking lot, I called my bank. The $7,500 dinner was on my card. One quick call later, the payment was voided. When I got home, another idea struck me and I grinned. I'd also planned a surprise for my parents, a 7-day luxury Caribbean cruise complete with private suites and premium activities. I walked inside, tossed my keys on the counter, opened the booking confirmation, and after a brief call with customer service, the $35,000 reservation was canceled. The cancellation email popped up in my inbox, and I felt lighter than I had in years. I poured a glass of sparkling cider, sank into my favorite chair, and just as I settled in, my phone started buzzing. Laura's name appeared first, then Helen, then Derek. The notifications poured in like a jackpot on a slot machine. By morning, I had 83 missed calls, and that was just the start. I knew there'd be fallout, but I didn't expect it to hit so quickly. The next day, my phone was a mess of missed calls and furious texts. I ignored them all, brewed a fresh pot of coffee, and sat at my desk, feeling more at peace than I had in ages. It was like cutting loose a heavy weight and watching it sink into the ocean. Laura was the first to crack. She showed up at my door around noon, looking frazzled, her 3 kids in tow. They immediately started roughhousing, nearly knocking over a side table with the only family photo I hadn't stored away, a picture of my sons from before my wife tore my life apart. Laura didn't waste time. "Matt, what happened last night?" she asked, her voice tight. "The restaurant said the payment didn't go through. Mom was mortified. We had to cover the sparkling cider out of pocket." I leaned back, sipped my coffee, and watched her kids toss cushions off my sofa. I let the silence stretch, letting her squirm. Her face flushed deeper. I said finally, setting my mug down. "Must have been a glitch. Maybe the real family should have handled it." Her jaw dropped and she stared at me like I'd slapped her. For a moment I thought she might apologize, show some remorse. Instead, she straightened up, trying to reclaim her usual haughty tone. "That's not funny, Matt. Mom and Dad were humiliated. They had to apologize to the staff. Do you know how expensive that place is?" I leaned forward, meeting her eyes. "Yeah, I know. I paid for it." She opened her mouth to argue, but stopped as the reality hit her. I stood, crossing my arms. "Check your email, by the way." Her face twisted in confusion as she fumbled for her phone, scrolling quickly. I watched her expression drain as she read the cruise cancellation notice. The surprise I'd funded, the one they'd likely already boasted about. Now it was gone. "Matt," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why would you do this?" I stepped closer, my voice calm but sharp, carrying years of pent-up frustration. "Because I'm done. Done being your fallback. Done being the family ATM. Done pretending we're a real family." Her kids, who'd been wrestling, stopped and stared at me, their small faces wide with confusion. I looked at Laura one last time. "I have a call to make." I opened the door. She stood frozen for a moment, then gathered her kids and left. She glanced back once like she didn't recognize me. I closed the door, her footsteps fading down the hall. My phone buzzed again. A text from Aunt Helen. "Matt, you ungrateful jerk. After everything we've done, this is how you repay us?" I let out a dry laugh, tossed my phone onto the couch, and headed to my office. If they thought this was the end of it, they were in for a surprise. A few days later, the full weight of my actions began to sink in. The calls and texts from my relatives slowed, but the silence felt heavier, like the calm before a storm. The next move came from Derek, the one who'd called me a moocher over the Lobster. I was wrapping up a client pitch when my phone lit up with his name. I let it ring, then played the voicemail on speaker, leaning back in my chair. His voice was shaky. "Hey, Matt, look, I think there's been a misunderstanding, all right? That dinner thing was just a joke. You know how Helen gets. Don't take it to heart. About the cruise, man, you gotta fix that. Mom and Dad were so excited. They're crushed. Just call me back, okay?" I smirked bitterly. Now that the free ride was over, it was just a joke. I deleted the message and shook my head. They still didn't grasp the consequences of their actions. For years, they'd pushed my limits, acting like my generosity was endless, assuming I'd always bail them out. 2 days later, Aunt Helen showed up at my office. I saw her through the glass wall as my assistant let her in, her face wearing a tight, fake smile. I closed my laptop and leaned back as she sat across from me, her oversized purse smacking the edge of my desk. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Matt, we need to clear the air," she said in a syrupy tone that didn't match her eyes. I raised an eyebrow and stayed silent. "I know you've been through a lot with the divorce," she continued, waving a hand like my life's collapse was a minor inconvenience. "But punishing the whole family over a little misunderstanding isn't fair." My jaw clenched, but I let her keep talking. "Your parents are devastated. You embarrassed them in front of everyone. And now this cruise nonsense? Matt, they're too old for this stress. You know your mom's heart isn't strong. Could you live with yourself if something happened to her?" There it was. The classic guilt trip, the same tactic they'd used since I was a kid, shuttling them to the airport for their last-minute trips. I stared at her, unflinching. "Helen, You called me a moocher at a dinner I paid for. You made me feel like an intruder at my own event. And now you expect an apology? She blinked, caught off guard, then tried to recover, her smile faltering. Oh, come on. I didn't mean it like that. We're family. Families fight, but they forgive. I leaned forward, voice low and steady. Real family doesn't bleed you dry and then laugh when you finally set a boundary. She stiffened, her hand gripping her purse strap so tightly it creaked. For a moment, I thought she might drop the act, but her smile snapped back into place. Fine, she said, standing abruptly. Keep acting like this, but don't expect us to pity you when you're all alone. Her heels clicked sharply as she stormed out. My assistant glanced at me, uncertain, but I waved it off and turned back to my laptop. Minutes later, my phone buzzed. A text from my dad, the first I'd heard from him since the restaurant. Son, we need to talk. This has gone too far. I let the phone fall onto my desk, the screen flashing briefly before going dark. They still didn't get it. They thought this was just another family spat, something a few apologies and hugs would fix. They had no idea what was coming. A week passed, and the silence from them was deafening. I knew my family too well to think they'd give up without a fight. They were regrouping, plotting their next move to reel me back in. The first sign of real panic came when my mom called. I let it go to voicemail, expecting her usual emotional manipulation, but her message caught me off guard. Matt, sweetheart, please call me. We miss you. I'm so worried. Her voice wasn't the usual commanding tone. It trembled with genuine fear, something I hadn't heard in years. Still, I deleted it. I'd been through too many of their traps to fall for it again. But it didn't end there. 2 days later, I pulled into my driveway and saw my dad's beat-up Ford parked on the street. That rusty old truck hadn't been near my house in years. He was sitting on my front steps, his weathered face set in a deep frown. I got out of my car, twirling my keys as I approached. Matt, he said gruffly, standing and shoving his hands into his worn jacket pockets. We need to talk. I held back a sigh. Typical dad, showing up unannounced, cornering me at my own home. I unlocked the door, walked inside, and he hesitated before following. The door clicked shut behind him. He glanced around, taking in the polished floors, sleek furniture, and modern decor, a stark contrast to the cluttered house I grew up in. Nice place, son, he muttered, sinking into a chair uninvited. I leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. What do you want, Dad? He paused, rubbing his stubbled jaw. For a moment, I thought he might actually apologize, acknowledge the years I'd carried their burdens. Instead, he sighed heavily. Your mom's falling apart. She can't sleep. She thinks you've abandoned the family. My jaw tightened, and I gripped the counter's edge. I didn't abandon anyone. I just stopped letting you all walk all over me. His eyes flashed. Walk all over you? You've got a fancy house, a big job. We never asked for more than you could give. I let out a cold laugh. You've been treating me like a cash machine for years. Did you think I didn't notice the loans you never repaid? The guilt trips? The snide comments at every family gathering? He shot to his feet, face flushing. We're your family, Matt. We're supposed to support each other. You've got all this, he gestured around the room, and you can't spare a little for us? I stepped closer. I'm not your lifeline. I'm not your fallback. I'm done cleaning up your messes. He stared at me, anger mixed with something else, maybe fear. For a second, I thought he might swing at me, like he nearly did when I was a teenager, and defied him. But his shoulders sagged, and he let out a shaky breath. Fine, he said quietly, defeated. If that's how you want it. He headed for the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. Without turning, he said, Money doesn't buy everything, Matt. You'll see that when you've got no one left. I didn't respond as the door closed, his heavy footsteps fading down the steps. I watched from the window as he climbed into his truck, the engine rumbling as he drove off, leaving a trail of exhaust. The house felt too still, too empty. I wanted to feel liberated, but instead, a hollow ache settled in my chest. The kind that comes when you finally sever ties to a past you should have left behind long ago. But it was done. No going back. A few more days passed, and the silence from my family felt like a brewing storm. I braced for another wave of texts or surprise visits, but nothing came. Then it hit in a way I hadn't expected. It started with Aunt Helen. I was at the gym, mid-set on squats, when my phone kept buzzing on the bench. I ignored it at first, but it wouldn't stop. I dropped the bar, grabbed a towel, and checked the screen. A text from Helen. "Matt, it's pathetic how you're turning your back on family. Shameful. Everyone knows you're just bitter about your divorce." The words stung, twisting the knife of my most painful loss. Typical Helen, weaponizing my past to hurt me. In the car, 3 more messages waited. Derek. "You're still pouting? Always been soft? No wonder she left." Laura. "Mom's been crying for days. Hope you're proud." Helen again. "You might have money, but you'll always be alone." I gripped the steering wheel until it creaked, rage simmering. They were trying to drag me back into their emotional games, but I wasn't the same pushover they remembered. At home, I poured a glass of sparkling cider and sat on the porch, the evening air cool against my skin. I scrolled through the old family group chat, long muted. The rumors had started. They'd painted me as the villain, the selfish son who ditched his family for no reason, the bitter man lashing out over his failed marriage. I took a slow sip, the warmth spreading through me. I still had one card left to play. I opened my laptop and pulled up the trust documents I'd drafted years ago when my business took off. I'd planned to leave a chunk to my parents, fund Laura's kids' education, and set up a family fund. It felt right back then, a way to care for those I loved, even if they didn't deserve it. I scrolled to the beneficiary section and, with a few clicks, erased every name. My entire estate would now go to charity. I leaned back, heart pounding, but a strange relief washed over me. They'd pushed me to this, taken my generosity, and turned it against me. I closed the laptop, finished my drink, and watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and red. My phone buzzed, another text from my dad. "Enough, Matt. Come to the house. Let's sort this out." I didn't open it. I let the screen go dark. They still thought this was the usual cycle: fight, apologize, hug it out, and return to normal. They believed I'd come crawling back, head bowed, wallet open, heart soft enough to forgive. They were wrong. Days later, on a quiet Sunday morning, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find my parents standing there. My mom clutched her purse, her eyes red and puffy. My dad stood beside her, jaw tight, his face more lined than I remembered. "Matt," my mom said, voice trembling. "Can we come in?" "We need to talk." I hesitated, then stepped aside. They shuffled into the living room, glancing at the polished floors and sleek furniture, a world apart from the cluttered home I grew up in. They sat on the couch, my mom dabbing her eyes with a tissue, my dad staring at his hands. I stood by the counter, arms crossed, waiting. My mom looked up, tears brimming. "Matt, honey, we're so worried. We miss you. The family doesn't feel whole without you." I stayed silent, watching her twist the tissue until it tore. Her hands shook. "We know things were said," she continued, voice breaking. "We didn't mean them. You know how Helen and Derek are. It was just a misunderstanding." My jaw tightened, the old anger rising. They were downplaying it, acting like I was overreacting, like they hadn't spent years chipping away at my dignity. My dad cleared his throat. "Son, this has gone far enough. We're family. We can't let a few sharp words tear us apart." "Sharp words?" I snapped, sharper than intended. "You think this is about a few words? You made me feel like a stranger in my own family." My dad's face hardened. You're acting like a kid, Matt. Cutting us off doesn't make you tough. It just leaves you alone. I stepped forward, heart racing. I'm alone because you pushed me there. You treated me like a bank, a punchline, a fallback. I gave you everything, paid your bills, cleared your debts, kept this family afloat, and the one time I say no, you tear me down. My mom sobbed harder, her tissue shredded. My dad's face twisted, anger and something else flickering in his eyes. We're your parents, Matt, he said, voice low. You owe us that much. I laughed, cold and sharp. I owe you? I've given you more than I ever should have. I'm done being your safety net. My dad shot to his feet, face red, fists clenched. For a moment, I braced for a swing, like when I was a teenager, and challenged him. But he deflated, shoulders slumping. Fine, he said, voice tight. We'll manage without you, you fool. He grabbed my mom's arm, pulling her up. She stumbled, crying softly, as he led her to the door. I followed, watching them cross the porch. My mom glanced back, her face a mix of grief and confusion. I held her gaze, jaw tight, heart pounding. She opened her mouth, but my dad tugged her along, and they walked to their car. I leaned against the doorframe, the weight in my chest heavy but different. No guilt, no regret, just a deep, unshakable calm. I'd finally reclaimed my life. I took a breath and let the door close behind me. Thank you for watching Story. Please subscribe and hit the notification bell for more real-life stories.